What is the worst way you've seen someone mismanage their money? One of my coworkers bought a new car because, wait for it, she couldn't afford to put tires on her current one. Grew up fairly wealthy, went to a private school with lots of other wealthy kids. Knew one girl who had two wealthy parents pass away when she was young. She lived with an uncle. She was messed up as a kid, really wild, always the first to try everything. In her own way incredibly sweet, always protected the less popular kids. Anyways, she hits 21, gets a huge trust fund. Her uncle puts up a fight for the money because he knows she's going to go nuts with it. It wasn't for the cash, he had much more than her. Ultimately he loses and she gets everything. It's the beginning of the end for her. She blows through massive wealth in 2 years doing untold amounts of cocaine, binge drinking, trips to crazy places, constantly surrounded by people using her for party money. We're talking millions of dollars here. Not a cent invested anywhere. Anyways, 2 years later she's back with the uncle, not a penny to her name. He loves her so of course takes her in. Everyone that hung on to her for the past 2 years is gone. Everyone laughs at her behind her back. A few overdoses and drug use left her a little slow. She tries school but it doesn't work. Her uncle gave her a job but it's a token thing. At least she's lucky enough that she had someone to look after her in the end. My brother-in-law bought a used BMW for $15,000 with a credit card at 26% April. A guy I worked with was always complaining that he was poor, although I later found out that this was solely due to bad budgeting and impulse spending. He was really good at his job, so I suggested that he do some freelance IT security consulting on the side. He did a job for a high-end jeweler which paid him around £2,000 for 2 days' work. He was ecstatic that he finally had enough money to fix all the problems he'd been putting off for ages, like the oil leak on his car, a new pair of work shoes, and get his boiler fixed. At the end of the job, he was leaving the retailers with cash in hand when he spotted a high-end watch in a display case which was £2,000 down from £3,500 or so. Unable to pass up such a bargain, he handed the £2,000 back and walked out with the watch instead. 2 days later he was complaining because his fridge was empty. My response was, "At least you can use the watch to time how long it takes you to starve." I have an idiot friend who's getting something like 30% of his wages garnished. Why? Because he forgot to pay his student loan. He's shit at paying bills, and it's not because he doesn't make the money for it. He has a decent job. He just literally ignores paper mail and emails reminding him, and then eventually demanding him to pay off things like credit card bills and his student loans. If he does bother to read them, it literally goes in one ear and out the other, just slides right out of his mind. After a few months he'll remember, log into his account, pay the payment in full with accrued interest, and shrug it off like it's normal. Somehow he forgot to pay his student loans for something like a year, and it went to collections. I told him he could even just set up automatic payments for that shit, and he agrees it's a good idea, and then just never does it. I offered to set it up for him, and it's always, later. Friend got $150K in life insurance from her mom passing. It was gone in a year. She paid a $20K bail for her boyfriend. At the end of that year, he was also gone. She works at KFC now. Well, the accountant at the small business I work at does a lot of funny things with money. Has a perfectly good, paid-off car, but it was slightly too old to drive for Uber to make extra money, so she got a lease on a brand new car through Uber. After a month she found out she wasn't making enough extra money from Uber to even pay the lease, and her commute was too far to drive the Uber car to work and back, because they limit the miles. After she weaseled out of her Uber lease, she decided she needed a brand new Harley that she had no idea how to drive. This was over a year ago. She has ridden it exactly once around her neighborhood. She will be paying for this motorcycle for another 4 years at least. She took out a second mortgage on her home to fix it up to get ready to sell. She is so happy with the remodel that she is keeping the house. She is a single mother twice over, and is always telling us how some nice man from her church paid for her daughter's school trip, or whatever. She is the dumbest person I have ever met, and I am always a little freaked out that she is handling our money. My coworker. She never has the money to pay important bills, but goes on $300 shopping sprees on the weekend. College friend graduated with over $100,000 in private student loans. The bank offered a $5,000 credit towards the loans as a graduation gift, or $1,500 in cash. They took the $1,500 and used it as a down payment on a new car. I went to community college my first year. I knew this guy that was from a super low-income family, and he received massive amounts of student loans. He blew it all on a used car, wheels, and a sound system. I tried to tell him it was a loan and not a grant. He disagreed. Lost touch with him a year or two later, but he has to be underwater in debt. Divorce. Growing up, we were good friends with a family that had made it big with selling airplane parts pre-internet age. The couple went through a nasty divorce that got strung out over a 6-year period. The wife was 100% convinced through her shitbag lawyers that her husband had funneled money into secret accounts. He didn't, and wasn't happy with his initial offer, the mansion, half the multi-millions, and $5,000 a month for child support alone. The court proceedings went on for years, and at the end of it all, they both pretty much had nothing due to court fees and lawyer fees. His business failed because of how unstable air travel became after 9/11. If she had just split things and taken that with the mansion and the other payments, she would have gotten $4.2 million from the divorce, not having worked a day in her life. One of my old friends was living paycheck to paycheck, less than that some months. She was eating food from work for breakfast, which was one of those ice cream places. When I was asking her about her finances to see where she could cut back, she mentioned that she smoked recreational weed every day, several times a day, but she said, "It's only a hobby that I could stop at any time." However, she refused to stop when I told her it was a possible avenue to cut back on if she wanted to comfortably make her bills. It kind of got tiresome to hear about how she had no money for food constantly. "Weed isn't addictive. I just like getting high too much to stop." Okay. People tend to forget that, while there are relatively few physical withdrawal symptoms with weed, psychological addiction is a very real thing. Overweight people do it with food all the time. I can stop eating anytime I want. I know someone that will refuse to work a regular job, lives off the women in his life, doesn't have 2 nickels to rub together at 52 years old, and complains constantly about how everything is rigged to keep him from succeeding. I gave my brother a step-by-step plan to cover his rent, keep his job, fill up his car, and pay me back within a 1-week period. He was tight on money. I found him at Nike with a large bag 2 hours later. That must have hurt. I have a friend who is 40 years old, single, lives by himself, and will buy weed as a priority over some of his bills. Every 2 to 3 months I'll get a call asking for a bailout. He is also on Social Security and lives in a subsidized apartment, pays $120 for rent. Very, very frustrating to get those calls for help. I used to work in a bank offering investment and lending advice. Car loans, mortgages, retirement savings, that sort of thing. I had a client who was a successful lawyer, and his father was a very successful lawyer. He married a successful lawyer. They made a lot of money, easily over $1 million each, so $2 million per year, gross household income. Every week they had zero money left. I tried to help by setting up an automatic contribution to a savings account. If they don't see it, maybe they won't spend it. No, they spend it. Every week they would call me to transfer the money out of savings and into their checking account. So I sat down with them and went over their budget. They didn't have one. They had no concept of what things cost. They didn't have a firm grasp of how much they made, or how much they spent. They bought impulsively and recklessly. The Dodge Viper was a big thing at the time, so he went out and bought one and financed it. He didn't have space for it, so he rented space to store it. He never drove it. He had it customized with expensive aftermarket stuff. It was a work of art. I don't know if he ever drove it at all. He had no interest in showing it or anything. It was a money pit. She had never cut her own finger or toenails. Her whole life she had just gone for a weekly mani-pedi. More frequently if she chipped a nail or something. She shopped a lot. She always looked amazing. They were very smart people, but had grown up with money and had no concept of it, like it would always just be there. I tried to help them budget, but that means deciding to go without something or delaying a purchase, and they had never done it before, so why start now? I left the bank and they were still going week to week. Wonderful people, but just no concept of money. I have a colleague in her mid-50s who is divorced with no kids. She is the sole means of her own financial support, i.e., no parents or siblings to fall back on. She lives alone in an apartment. She recently took out her second debt consolidation loan. As soon as she gets those credit cards maxed out, she takes out a loan, pays the cards off, and runs them up again. I'd feel sorry for her if the charges were for general living expenses, but they're not. They're for highlights in her hair, manicures, trips to the Caribbean with boyfriend du jour, those cute sandals that she'll wear twice before replacing them with cuter sandals. High-end everything, makeup, perfumes, clothing. Once in a while, she will lament about her $40,000 loans and the fact that she is literally 2 paychecks from being homeless, and I will gently point out that less trips to the salons and the islands might put her in a better financial position. I work hard and I deserve nice things. I deserve vacations. I deserve to feel good and look good. Don't tell me how to spend my money. This, coming from a woman who has to pay for her lunch with a credit card the day before payday because she's overdrawn on her checking account. I've seen her do this, and she explained why she was doing it. She refuses to believe that she's the cause of her own financial difficulties. I worked with someone like this too. She was pushing 60 and getting close to retirement age and still didn't own her own home, and was renting. Instead of saving her not inconsiderable salary for the last few years towards a home, she chose to get a Mercedes convertible on the basis that, "I'll never be able to own something like this again." Just a nitpick, but we shouldn't assume owning a home is a good financial decision for everyone. Now it sounds like she is generally making poor financial decisions, but the decision to rent over buy is not necessarily a bad decision. A friend at 37 who have never worked any job that pay above minimum wages inherited tons of money from his father. Despite having absolutely no experience in any of those positions or even how to manage a business. Suddenly opened up a restaurant which was a disaster from day one and closed down not long afterward. Decided to get into photography business, throw away tons of money on all super fancy equipment he have absolutely no idea what is for or how to use, never made a penny. Tried to start a DJ business. No bite. Disappeared off face of the earth right afterward. Every once in a while my stepdad will calculate how much money he could save by quitting drinking, then decides to quit and starts spending like he has that money. He doesn't actually quit. Do you have a similar story? Leave a comment and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this one.